Hi. So it's interesting to look back on this ZTE issue.
Yeah.
It started as a FCC issue or Iran sanction issue, but it turns out that both sides, United States and Chinese government, framed it into a trade issue. And the outcome is in China, we see a higher level of nationalism because of this issue, and also a more openness on the side of China because China is going to buy more US goods. And on the United States side, it's more like Trump is trading favors with China, so he would actually have his agricultural base to be lifted of this threat from China. So what do you think of this back and forth? What kind of impact it has? Is that just a run-of-the-mill trading favors, moving pieces and framing issues in a different way, or it has any sort of strategic value?
Yeah, well, in every trade negotiation is a search for leverage. And obviously the ZTE's ability to buy certain essential components from the United States turns out to have a lot of leverage in it, right? And I read a report today that ZTE's already lost $2 billion as a result of not being able to buy the chips from the United States. That's the first point. So there's always a search for leverage in the trade negotiations, but this is a different. The ZTE thing is different in kind, and I think it's important to treat it that way. ZTE is a serial sanctions buster, right? And it was Iranian sanctions and North Korea sanctions. 280 instances of violations into North Korea as well, and they paid $1 billion fine, and then they had this remedial period. And they didn't do what they were supposed to do during the remedial period, right? So it's been that's an enforcement action. I think it's important for the United States to enforce its sanctions regime. So I don't think it's right to kind of mix them in, frankly, the way that it's been mixed in. I think it should have been treated as an enforcement action. But it's obviously there's a search for leverage, and it's had a big impact in China. As you were alluding to. I think one of the impacts it's had in China, of course, is to really reinforce the Chinese drive to develop indigenous technologies, right? And not be as and they said this, not to be as rely as much on outside technology. But I think it probably would make more sense to have to separate it out because, in fact, it's not part of the trade issue, right? It's a sanctions enforcement issue. These guys were serial sanctions busters, and they paid, I said, $1 billion fine, and they still didn't conform the behavior to the law. So if you're going to do business in the United States, you have to follow U.S. law.